The start of a Sinsra Solar Empire 2 game is incredibly important, and your early choices make a lasting impression on your build going forwards. Perhaps the most critical decision you'll take in the opening few seconds of the game will determine which capital ship leads your first fleet as you head out into the sector to explore, expand, exploit and exterminate your way to victory. In this video, we'll take a look at the 5 different capital ships available to each of the 3 playable races in the game, and how they measure up as a first choice for your military. Note that the 2 Vasari factions always start the game with the old space egg, also known as the Jarrasul Evacuator. But so Vasari players aren't left out here, we'll consider their choice of second capital ship instead. This is just a rough overview of the relative capabilities of each ship as they are suited towards the challenges you'll face in the early game, and you should experiment with all of them to figure out your own overarching strategy and fleet level tactical play. These recommendations do not take into account games featuring set teams, and assume you're playing free-for-all against other players or against computer opponents. Let's take a look at the TEC's capital ship roster first. The Akan battlecruiser is a solid choice for early game economic growth, as its colonize ability removes the need for a Protev colony frigate in your first expansion fleet and provides free logistics track upgrades to the newly colonized planet too. The extra trade points it provides can be very helpful too. The Akan's relatively weak armament means that it cannot expand alone, and thus requires a larger escort fleet than the other TEC options, but its point defense cannons provide adequate fleet protection from the Javelin missile cruisers often found around better defended neutral worlds, meaning less losses overall. The Akan also features excellent abilities for the late game, and this can make it worthwhile as a first pick, leveling up to grab the ultimate armistice ability to force an early game advantage in mid-game skirmishes. The Sova carrier's excellent weapon loadout and ability to produce and field both strikecraft and corvettes means it excels in early game colony acquisition. In skillful hands and accompanied by just a handful of escorting frigates, the Sova can expand the TEC's territorial holdings like nothing else. Where other capital ships might need to pause to replace losses, the Sova can quickly build more corvettes out in the field. Its 9-point defense guns will shoot down missile barrages that would rout a Col battleship or Marsa dreadnought, while its ultimate ability can push out large amounts of extra strikecraft into a battle very quickly. The Sova's downside is that it's countered by flak and point defense, and early game skirmishes with enemy capital ships can go badly if they are forewarned of the Sova's presence in an engagement, and had time to build ships that effectively neutralise strikecraft and corvettes. It's not the strongest TEC capital ship in a straight up fight, and will enjoy the support of a Col or Dunov eventually. The iconic Col battleship is a frontline warhorse that will dominate nearly any early game fracas, with heavy ordnance dealing out massive damage while shrugging off huge amounts of incoming fire with its heavily armoured hull. The Col is designed for high pressure battles against the toughest cruisers and capital ships, but is subject to overkill on smaller, lighter frigates, and bringing an escort of faster tracking frigates and corvettes is advised. The Col can trade well with most early game gravity well defence fleets, but lacks PD, and will struggle against Javelin missile cruisers unless well defended by Garda flak frigates. Bring a Protev colony frigate along, and the Col makes a worthy leader for an early game expansion force, and while it's unlikely to progress quite as quickly as the Sova carrier, it'll face down any threat from aggressive neighbours, and its incredible combat prowess scales up right through the game. Just make sure you're using it aggressively to make the most of it. The Marsa is also built for full frontal assaults, and while it's not quite as adept as the Col in one-on-one slugging matches against single capital ship targets, its ultimate ability, when suitably augmented, can output tremendous damage and decimate anything in its wide area of effect. You'll get the best out of the Marsa when bombarding enemy worlds, but this can make a great starting capital ship when you're expecting heavy resistance from neutral forces or aggressive neighbours. The Marsa's weapon systems have a tight firing arc and sometimes require the ship to manoeuvre to hit moving targets, and it can be foiled by flak and point defense systems. Of course, you'll need a Protev colony frigate to settle worlds as you expand, but the Marsa is usually a solid starting capital ship. The Dunov battlecruiser is a capable warship on its own, but excels in a supporting role, and most of its abilities will go unused until it has a shielded, antimatter using fleet worthy of its specialities. It is a fine ship used in support of the TEC's other capital ships and cruisers, but for a first choice at the start of the game, it's a hard sell indeed. If you want a well-leveled Dunov to support later capital ships for an expected early game engagement and aren't expecting much resistance during expansion, or you're after a self-imposed challenge for making a suboptimal choice, pick the Dunov. For everybody else, the other options make a lot more sense. Now let's take a look at the Advent's capital ship lineup. The Radiant's battleship is a combat monster, and battleships are usually well suited to the rigours and challenges of the early game expansion phase. While it can handle most early game threats just fine, it doesn't truly shine until it has unlocked its classic combination of animosity and energy absorptive armour, protecting accompanying light frigates by drawing enemy fire to itself. This incoming damage then fuels a powerful scaling weapon reload bonus to amplify an already considerable DPS output and will make short work of Guardian fleets. The Radiance lacks point defense and strikecraft, but expands just fine if properly supported, and may be the best choice for coming out on top if you bump into another Empire's expansion force. Progenitor Mothership is a popular first capital ship for Advent forces, with a decent complement of side-mounted weapons that can unload an alpha strike into any front-facing target and abilities to fast-track unity points. Its colonizability grants bonus focus track points to your newly settled worlds, but unless you really want to play with unity abilities early, skipping this for Colony Seeds nanites from the Jiskan Expeditionary Force may improve your early game economic outlook. However, its ultimate ability Rebirth and Shield Regeneration will keep your fleets in the field longer, and that functionality is extremely useful in the early phases of the game, potentially negating even a Mars's lower level missile barrage if timed right. However, the Progenitor takes longer to grind down tough foes, and wants lots of protection if it's to survive an encounter with a determined enemy fleet, so racing for cruisers or a second capital ship is a wise idea. If you want the highest DPS of all in the early game, the Houseion carrier and its advanced strikecraft squadrons will make short work of Guardian fleets, while providing a natural defense against enemy strikecraft or missiles. Focusing on a bomber loadout will quickly eliminate Krosov siege frigates, allowing the Houseion to move on to the next gravity well while subordinate frigates mop up stragglers. Note that the Houseion is the Advent's only early game option for point defense. The Houseion carrier is less suited towards tackling enemy fleets that see it coming and bring along adequate PD or flak, and like the Progenitor, you'll quickly want to field cruisers or more capital ships ready for that inevitable first war of aggression. The Rapture battlecruiser possesses a unique domination ability to convert enemy ships over to your side, an enormous force multiplier that simultaneously reduces an enemy threat while increasing your own. When used in tandem with a pirate boarding crew, this allows a Rapture-led fleet to snowball in power very quickly indeed. With adequate PD and the Vengeance ability reflecting damage back at an aggressor, the Rapture itself can be tough to kill, but requires careful player attention to get the best out of it, and might not be the best choice for beginners. That said, when you finally reach its ultimate ability Malice, pairing the Rapture with a Radiance battleship and its Cleansing Brilliance ability will be the death knell to even very powerful, heavily defended fleets, and you should use this combo to gain an early advantage. The Revelation battlecruiser is the Advent's rather exotic take on a siege ship, with abilities to shut down orbital structures and ships for a limited time, fielding a decent range of weapon systems but lacking the sheer combat prowess of the Marsa or the Vulcras. Much like the Dunov then, the Revelation makes more sense once the game's focus has shifted from neutral colony acquisition into the early mid-game footsie stance with neighbouring factions, where it excels in supporting fleets attempting to capture held worlds. Guidance, Quell and Provoke Hysteria are all mostly useless in the early game, and with much better options available, you'll likely want to pass on the Revelation unless you've a specific plan for an early rush on your neighbours and have the chops to pull it off. The Vasari's first ship is always the Jarrasul Evacuator, but will get access to a second relatively quickly, with 2 extra capital ships built in the first 10 minutes a possibility if you know how. So, which capital ship would be a great second pick for their fleets? The Courtauld Devastator has thick armour, strong shielding and exceptional survivability, with the Vasari's trademark regeneration technologies making this one of the most durable damage-soaking tanks in the whole game. The Courtauld's abilities boost its own performance while applying substantial debuffs to its enemies, and these powers stack well with the Jarrasul Evacuator's Gravity Warhead and Subspace Rupture. Sins 2 features a lot of combat, and a battleship will never be a bad choice for a second ship, and may make a particularly nasty surprise for any adversary rushing the Vasari, assuming that the Jarrasul to be their only capital ship target. The Vasari's mighty siege specialist Vulcras Desolator is a front-facing war machine whose intended utility would be fully utilised until a little later on when there are enemy colonies to assault. That said, its combat prowess is undeniable. While it lacks the area of effect attacks of the Jarrasul and suffers against enemy fielding extensive point defence, with this being a second choice of capital ship you won't be waiting long to use its best abilities. The Vulcras is built to take on heavily defended colonies and orbital structures, and its powerful disintegration beam ultimate ability can be used to great effect on enemy starbases and capital ships in defensive posture. The Skirantra carrier lacks the offensive punch of either the Kortal or the Vulcras, but when properly supported, Strikecraft and Armament loadout will manage clearing neutrally owned gravity wells just fine, and synergizes nicely with the Space Eggs abilities too. When paired with the original Jarrasul to increase Strikecraft density and provide a second heavily armoured target to soak up enemy firepower, the Skirantra's PD guns and nanite repair cloud can turn the tables on an otherwise losing engagement. This ability to heal friendly ships and spawn even more with regenerate forces also makes this mighty carrier a great expansion party leader, delaying the need for Severan Overseers cruisers and freeing up resources for other purposes. Second Jarrasul Evacuator may sound an odd choice for the Vasari's second capital ship, as you're losing out on additional functionality that adding a different ship would bring. However, if you're playing on a very large map and you're sure you'll not be engaged in a tight conflict too early, getting a second well-defended capital ship out to rapidly expand in a different direction to the first could work, and that can be worth considering. The Jarrasul makes a useful support platform in mid to late game engagements, but you may be better off complementing your first Space Egg with a different type entirely. The Antarct Marauder is built to lead Vasari raiding parties, and provide mobility support as part of more dedicated assault operations, where its sabotage and phase out hull abilities can throw a spanner into the works of an enemy's tactical response when under pressure. Like the various siege-focused capital ships in the game, the Antarct works best when attacking enemy-owned colonies, and its abilities are largely wasted in expansion, while its relative weakness in head-to-head duels and reliance on high-finesse tactical manoeuvre to win otherwise even engagements gives it a high skill cap. The Antarct is a must-have ship for supporting mid and endgame invasion fleets, as its special abilities can be game-changing, but for a second capital ship, you'll get better performance from the Kortal, Vulcras or Skirantra. That said, if you like dense micro, high-risk raiding strategies, you may get a lot of mileage from this deadly high-tech vessel. Each capital ship has its own unique use cases, and while some of them might not immediately make sense as a first or second choice to lead your fleets, a clever commander may be able to blindside an opponent with a stunning play using its advanced, unusual abilities in a creative way. So, get creative, break that meta, and go conquer yourself a new empire.